Chapter 4 Growing. Our vegetable garden was something to be talked about. Giant cabbage leaves, ribbed and green and folding into solid balls. Leafy callaloo tomatoes, already outstanding and still filling out. Okras like rounded daggers. Bananas had burst from the ground, and with such healthy sheeted leaves. Road as they were, the pineapples looked pretty. I kept 5 goats, 2 mothers, and 3 kids, and father had Lizette the mule and the horse Marble. The farm was something to see in the early morning, especially when everything looked so green and so rested. And then the sun would hop over the coxcomb serrated hill and feed its light into the fields in an advancing arc, broken only by the odd tree, until the entire place was flooded. We'd go down there, father and I, and walk among the rows of tomatoes and prune gormandizers off them, and I'd feel the hardening balls of the cabbage heads, and father'd say, not harshly at all, "The watering can, Remy," and I'd take it and dip water from the barrel we kept filled in the vegetable garden, for at this time of the year the drought was on, and we must do some irrigating. People did talk about our farm, and they came, at first to look at it and then to buy. To have heard them haggle for a bunch of callaloo, ah, son, it not worth it. The same people who earlier said it was the best callaloo they had ever seen. Turning away, father would say, "Take it or leave it." I was happy to hear him say something like that, for in the old days he would have let them get away with their robbery. Then they started to ask for credit. "I'll come payday." I guess he was tired of their pestering, for he turned soft again and began to let them go with cabbages on credit, with handsome bunches of callaloo and tomatoes, a pound heavy in some instances. Then they were begging, and he gave them. I didn't like it, but it was his business. It was his way, and he liked it that way. But when one day I went into the square and I saw Jim Pearl buying from Jake's store after having declared he was broke and after having begged from us, I was riled. I told father. He looked far away into the hills at nothing whatsoever. I don't think he liked it either. He only said, "That's people, son." "But father, you can't let them." He turned away. "People don't change overnight, Remy, but that's it," he declared, slamming his fist into the palm of one hand. "To be good among them is to be a fool. Not any more." And he walked off with resolution. Whoopee for father. That was it. He had decided to meet them on their own ground. Always fight fire with fire is what I hold to be a fact. This was the healing act. This would make him the businessman he ought to have been continuously. Why had he got soft anyway? Maybe he had thought that by being wealthy he could splurge, get slack with his business, and still stay up there somehow. Now he knew, and here was his first move to seek once more the top. Hurrah, father, 1,000 hurrahs. He would be okay now. He would succeed again. For as soon as you stop one loophole, other stoppages of other loopholes follow quickly after. Resurrection. Father bought me a puppy, a black and white bundle of life which on milk and food grew rapidly, running about behind me as I roamed the bush. A boy couldn't be happier. Not really. I called him Max. Very agreeable little fella. He and I wander across Mrs. Hilcher's footbridge and sniff in the sweet blossoms of the mango trees on her side of the river. Donna Ray would spot and join us and handle Max, and in his great joy he'd lick her hands and then her cheeks too, and he was extraordinarily good at extracting the Donna Ray smile, the gathered lips gathering and then splintering. Max could, even a dog could. Donna and I would help each other with problem mathematics in the evenings, and we'd sometimes fish the river, using the bamboo-made basket against the banks, flushing the crayfish into it, and she'd carry the pan for the fish. We'd share the catch between our 2 houses, and we'd both be cooking crayfish soup at one and the same time, and to judge which was better, by mere smelling, of course, Mrs. Hilcher's or ours, I'd have to go on the bridge which was halfway between us and sniff and judge. Mrs. Hilcher was too accomplished a cook. We lost every time. Sometimes Donna Ray and I would walk to the village on Friday afternoons too, to buy fresh meat at the butcher's stall, for it was a poor family indeed, or one with odd tastes, that did not want a bit of fresh beef on Fridays, or pork. It was soup, supper, or liver or pork chops, but always something fresh. Nobody took any particular note of Donna Ray and me until one afternoon when I rode Marble and persuaded her to climb up behind me. Well, being a farm girl at heart, nobody took any particular note of Donna Ray and me until one afternoon when I rode Marble and persuaded her to climb up behind me. Well, being a farm girl at heart, a lover of life, lived to rustic hilt, if you get what I mean, she agreed, and she sat the horse well too. But when we casually jogged into the people-filled square barebacked, the tongues did wag. I was sorry, though, for the talk was about her, not about me. Tomboy, they said, a disgraceful thing, and she in a dress. But I knew that it went deeper than that, for what was so despicable about a girl riding barebacked in a village? I knew I was right when I heard one of them say, I guess that son aiming to marry too off. Poor Donna Ray. But in spite of their meddling, we rode back the way we had come. People, you don't always listen to them, because in doing so you subject yourself to their direction. I am, of course, quoting Father, and Donna Ray had a similar philosophy. Let them talk, she said. I don't care. And though she said it softly, you knew it was meant with rock-bottom hardness. By now our farm was bursting at the seams with garden produce, cabbages, tomatoes, callaloo, escallion, okras. It was too much for village consumption, and they were haggling too much anyway, or asking for credit, to which Father had put a stop. We had to seek an outside market, and I nudged Father about it. Bright, Remy, he said. I have been thinking that too. On Saturday we'll load the cart up and go to market, huh? We? Why not? Let's go have a fling. He looked searchingly at me. Unless you don't want to. I wasn't thinking about me, sir, I smiled awkwardly. Father, shouldn't you ask somebody else to go? What somebody else? Don't you feel a bit bad going on a cart? You? I knew him in his glory, when he had a chauffeur to drive his truck loaded with bananas to the wharf, he following in his car to pick up his cash or the vouchers for that cash, and now to want to travel in a cart into that same town? Look, son, I understand the way you feel, and it's no easy thing, but we're starting again. At least I am. When I started the first time, it was this way, small. First with a donkey to drive ahead of me with my produce, then it was a cart. He looked up to the hills as he chuckled. Actually, we're one step ahead of the first time. We have a cart at this time. We have a cart this time. I didn't say anything. You can't talk down courage. Moreover, he went on, a horse should never be too proud, never, never, too proud to carry its own grass. Yes, sir, but I only thought Mrs. Hilcher would. Mrs. Hilcher? Look, Remy, if something isn't right for you, don't go planting it in somebody else's lap. Yes, sir. It was clean as a whistle philosophy like this which made Father what he was. I agree it was sound as the gospel truths, but it had one flaw. He was an odd man out. Were there many people like him, it would have been all right to have and practice such a philosophy. But there was little use in being good in a crowd which didn't practice goodness, let alone appreciate it. You were just wasting your goodness. You don't have to be like them, but neither do you have to waste all that goodness. We reaped a prize of vegetables, and Father said, why not, Remy? Why not throw in a couple of goat kids too? They're getting mighty mischievous in my young bananas. Which was true, so I decided which two we'd take to the market, the biggest ones. They were young but robust and handsome. I'd bind their legs and dump them somewhere in the cart. We were all set. That Friday night we were invited to the Hilchers for supper. I could smell the beef soup all the way from my place. We washed up and were there at 6 o'clock. Max went with us. Father and I sat and watched both women get things ready. It was pleasing to see Donna Ray handling herself like a woman. She looked cute in an apron. Their house, oh my, how it smelt of the rich, fresh beef soup. Father took his harmonica out. This was how informal we were in their house. He knocked the keys down in his palms, as all harmonica players will do, even though there was no spittle in his as yet to be dislodged. Then he played a chord, fast and sweet and loopy, and Max barked at the music's suddenness. Father played Sentimental Journey, and you had to follow it note by note. So absolutely rhythmic and syrupy it was, both sad and sweet as a matter of fact. And I could notice Mrs. Hilcher slowing down in her movements to listen, and I saw Donna Ray's eyes more limpid than ever, looking on in wonder at Father. That made me remember our market outing, and as soon as we had sat down to help them a little with their supper, I'd broached the subject. "We're going to the market tomorrow," I said. "Oh," said Mrs. Hilcher. "Only oh." I'd have to try harder. "With the cart," I said. I meant for her to go, not Father. He had suffered enough. People would make a fool of him, a laughing stock. From a car to a cart, from Robin Hill to a loop of land and a hovel. At first, the mention of the cart had no effect on any of them, so I said, "We're going to fill it full of vegetables, Father and I, and sell them in the market." Mrs. Hilcher looked up from her soup. "Who?" "Why, Father and I." She wiped her mouth. You could see she was thinking what I had thought and what I had intended her to think. "Why not let me?" she said after a short time. "Eh, Father? And I could drive the cart and she do the selling. Women are better sellers, Father. I mean, people haggle so. They'll just haggle you into the ground." Father looked crossly at me. He knew what I was up to, and not only that, but that I had succeeded. His eyes said, "You haven't learned not to meddle, have you?" Aloud he said, "You put up a pretty strong argument, don't you?" "Yes, sir," I said with absolute abandon. "The boy's right," Mrs. Hilcher agreed. "I mean, son, if I'm going, if I have to go, and I have to go, and I have nothing much to do but buy a little of this and a little of that, why not let me go for you? And I'd enjoy the ride in the cart, rest my poor weary bones." She was one of those women who walked the short distance to the town. She was also one of those who went, it seemed, for the sole purpose of purchasing fresh sea fish. Some people treated the procurement of fresh sea fish on Saturdays and in a smaller amount on Wednesdays with the seriousness of a quasi-religion. They'd have to have fresh fish to make fish tea or to fry or to be escovitched and left over for Sunday if escovitched they were. But what Mrs. Hilcher said made sense. What was the use of her going there to waste a whole day in buying a little of this and a little of that when she could help us out? "Yes, Father," I said. "Can't you see? I could drive the cart. There's nothing to it. I drive well, and Lizette is so easy to handle. And you may ride in on Marble in the afternoon, just in case." I cleared my throat. "Just in case you want to buy something, if you want to personally buy something." "A good idea, I think," I said, praising myself. Father smiled. "You ought to become a lawyer, Remy," he said. "So I drive the cart?" "If Betty's here, willing to risk her neck, sure, you drive it." "Risk, son? This boy's yours, body and soul. Why shouldn't I trust him?" Meaning that she trusted Father and me, mostly me. "So it's settled," I said. "Settled," Mrs. Hilcher said. "Mrs. Hilcher," I said, "I like you. What you going to sell in the market, Donna Ray?" "Who said I was going?" she asked rather unhappily. "Not going?" I said. She stirred her soup, stirred and stirred it. I looked at Mrs. Hilcher until she said, "Okay, let's make it a big party." Father was the only one who didn't look happy. But I knew that he would soon be infected by our jollity. With everything settled now, I got seriously into the soup. Fresh beef soup a la village is nothing like what you brew up quickly from a canned or paper-packed soup stock. It is a rich business, copiously invested with the most correct ingredients of breadfruit, chocho, yam, escallion, thyme, and pepper. It was good for you. It was good before, but now that I was tasting it anew and with realized hope, it was a great deal better. Poor Max, what a dog's life he had to lead. Because the soup's pepperishness excluded him, he was forced to sup on milk with a bone to wrangle with. Under the table, I could hear him, his little teeth busy grazing the bone while in his puppy's throat he swore at Donna Ray's spitting cat. Our night was honeyed over with the walk back to our place, another of those moonlighting nights with the air mango blossoms sweet and the bamboos piping and squeaking and the plants of the land lying moon-silvered for a little while only to be ruffled and dappled by the wind. On other village hearths, other dinners, the wind told me so. Max ran ahead of us, sniffing out every bush and kicking up his leg twice to wet against two particularly favored bush clumps. Under the bridge, the drought-starved water was faintly rippling. I went to bed, but for a while I could not sleep, and even when I did, my fragile slumber was pierced through and through by a crunching cart and by crowds of babbling market-happy people.